Thank you for joining me for the 5th episode of Citizen Arcane. This one is about American defectors, Americans who either were accused of or did in fact defect to another country. Most of the time it's going to be North Vietnam or North Korea and a little bit of China. And before I begin my top 5, I want to just give a couple of honorable mentions. The first is to Spite House by Monica Jensen Stevenson. She wrote another book which is a little bit more about the supposed incursion of American commandos to kill Americans who had defected to or were just being held in captivity long after the Vietnam War and were therefore an embarrassment to the American government. Another honorable mention goes to The Spitting Image, Myth, Memory, and the Legacy of Vietnam by Jerry Lembeck, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I have not read this book yet. I will, because number 5 on my list is CNN's Tailwind Tale, Inside the Vietnam's Last Great Myth by Jerry Lembeck. And it is a little bit clinical. It was a little bit hard to read. I wound up ordering this in old school book format, and I did work my way through it. It was not a lot of fun to read. It was basically saying that there were no Americans kept in North Vietnam or in Vietnam after the war ended, and the ones that, the few that were there voluntarily. Number 4, Turncoat and Americans, 12 Years in Communist China by Morris R. Wills, excuse me. I remember I got this book a long time ago. It was in like the dollar bin. I don't think it's been digitized. I'm sure it's not in print anymore. You could probably find it on eBay. It was kind of an enjoyable read. Ultimately, this gentleman came back to the United States very apologetic, I guess. He felt like he had made the wrong decision, but spent 12 years of his life in communist China. Number 3, Conversations with the Enemy, the story of PFC Robert Garwood by Winston Groom. Yes, the same Winston Groom that wrote Forrest Gump. And also, this is the one that I think the movie with Ralph Macchio was made on. Bobby Garwood, I believe, is still alive today. He lives somewhere on the East Coast, Virginia, if I remember correctly. And he has been either vilified or lionized by especially the veteran community for a very long time. There's a lot of people, and there are just as many opinions. It sounds like the accepted dogma right now is that he was very young. He was a very young Marine when he was captured. And he wound up learning Vietnamese extremely well. He was charged, as I recall, with holding a weapon and guarding other POWs, and obviously that made him a villain. But he did come back to the States. I don't think he was convicted of defecting, as was Charles Jenkins, who defected to North Korea in the 60s and then came back, and the number 1 book on my list is by him. Kiss the Boys Goodbye, How the United States Betrayed Its Own POWs in Vietnam by Monica Jensen Lewinsky and William Stevenson, Monica Jensen Stevenson and William Stevenson. It is an extremely enjoyable book. If you like conspiracy books, and I do, please let me know any that you have. You will really get into this one. This one just has all of the makings of a great story, and of course the peril that's in there. Some of these people, according to this book, were held into the 80s and 90s, and frankly, there were French POWs in Vietnam during the American War in Vietnam. Okay, and number 1 is The Reluctant Communist: My Desertion and Court-Martial by Charles Jenkins, who did, along with 4 others, actually not at the same time, but at separate times, all defected from the American Army to North Korea in the 1960s. Just as a quick note, there was Larry Allen Absher. He went in 1962. I think he was the first one. James Joseph Dresnach, who also defected in 1962 and just recently passed away, living happy as a clam in North Vietnam until he did. He had 2 sons, all of whom he and both of his sons made propaganda videos, and by all accounts, they are loyal to the North Korean regime. And Jerry Wayne Parrish, who I think is the one who died under semi-mysterious circumstances early on in his captivity. He went in 1963. Anyway, The Reluctant Communist is a very, very enjoyable book. Get it if you can. Thank you again for watching my channel. Please like and subscribe.